How's it going, everybody? Hope you are doing well. I've got a slightly different episode of Q&A Tuesday for this week, so let's dive right into it. One of the things that I get asked a lot about from both private students as well as fellow musicians is how to develop better melodic phrasing. And how do we take the notes of a scale or the notes of a key and become a little more expressive with our physical delivery of those sounds? So what I want to give you to work on today will hopefully give you some insight into some things that you might be missing in your own personal vocabulary of phrasing. So here's where we want to start, and I will post the PDF of all of these examples in the private group so you can go through this stuff at your own pace. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is the idea of what I call melodic pronunciation, which is how do we use stylistic techniques to actually deliver a melodic phrase. Okay, let's say I'm playing over a basic A minor chord sound. All right, let me split the screen here. All right, let's say I've got a basic A minor tonality, and I say, all right, I want to, build a nice little pentatonic scale phrase. All right, and that's totally fine. Okay, I'm playing within the overall key center of the music, but it's a little stale, right? Remember that a melodic phrase is called a phrase because it should be a musical sentence, and how we deliver that sentence is just as important as the notes that we are playing. So to breathe some life into this scale phrase, the first thing you need to be able to do, of course, is to stylize it. You want to use articulations and inflections and stylistic techniques to instantly upgrade the sound of this basic scale phrase, or any phrase for that matter, right? So what are some common stylistic techniques that we could put with this basic scale phrase? Well, we could use things like legato with hammer-ons and pull-offs. We could use sliding technique, bends, vibrato. Okay, so one simple example of stylizing this basic A minor pentatonic phrase would be, instead of picking through every note, what if I, because of the nature of how this phrase falls on the fretboard, what if I do pull-offs across this phrase? Okay, so I'm decorating it a little bit more. Stylistically, I'm delivering a little bit of a different sound because of the legato. I like to think of stylistic elements, articulation, and phrasing ideas, at least from the technique perspective, is kind of like when an actor auditions for a movie, okay? If 10 people are auditioning for one part in a film, they are all reading the same script. It's all the same words, but it's their delivery that counts, okay? If I went into audition for a movie and I read the script that they gave me, and then the next person to come in was Joe Pesci, or the next person to come in was Christopher Walken, how much different are they going to deliver those same exact words? Which means a lot of times problems with phrasing is not note choice, it's the delivery of the notes and how you actually physically execute the musical sentence. So here is the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to melodic pronunciation, okay? So I've got this stylized version of my pentatonic phrase. Okay, and let me play this over a little blues jam track so you can hear it in rhythmic context. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Now, there's nothing really wrong with this phrase, but I find that, as far as my own perception of this, because of the fact that all the picked notes fall on the beat, while my stylistic elements of the pull-offs fall off the beat or between the beat, to me it sounds a little bit rhythmically lopsided. Okay, in other words, the way that I'm pronouncing or delivering this phrase dynamically emphasizes the notes on the beat, because that's where you're hearing the pick attack. So instead of sounding like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, to me it sounds a little more like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, I'm really, nailing the strong beats of the pulse of the music. Okay, which da, 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 da. There is an epidemic of people always playing everything that resolves directly to the beat. And one of the first things to really be aware of when you're developing your physical ability to phrase a melody is this, because this is the problem I ran into when I was first developing physical ability with stylistic techniques, whether it's hammer-ons, pull-off, slides, bends. It never occurred to me that the rhythmic location of those techniques was just as important as the process of building the physical skill to play that stuff. But the more I learned about developing good phrasing, I started to realize that the right kind of pronunciation of a phrase is just as important as playing the right notes. Okay, so if I play this particular stylized version of this scale, okay, this one phrase, right? If I go back to where I started, and I'm thinking rhythmically 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, okay? When I play that exact same phrase this way, okay, here's what's happened. Number one, I've changed the fingering, okay? I've moved the notes to a different part of the fretboard, but here's the important thing. How do the inflections fit rhythmically, okay? Well, in this interpretation, the stylistic techniques I'm using, which are the pull-offs on that little slide at the end, okay, those techniques actually fall into the beat, while the majority of my picked notes are now actually on the offbeat. It's amazing how different this one little change can totally transform our perception of this melody, okay? So if I've got my jam track going again, okay, my original interpretation of this was pull-offs where I'm picking on the beat and then pulling off on the offbeat, right? So whereas this, that to me sounds like a better pronunciation, okay? In other words, I'm using a more even dynamic approach. It sounds much more like an even 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, as opposed to 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, okay? So I'm doing pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, pull off, pick, slide. And all of my legato sounds, whether it's the pull off or the slide, is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So I'm using legato to hit the beat and not to play legato after the beat, okay? So the basic pronunciation guideline to be aware of when you use your stylistic techniques, you want to physically deliver those techniques in a very intentional way so that they actually rhythmically resolve on the beat, okay? This is going to make your phrasing more dynamically even and more balanced, okay? Every great musician I've ever heard, doesn't matter what instrument or style they play, they are keenly aware of how they want to rhythmically place stylistic techniques. It's not just note choice, it's delivery, like I was saying, the voice of the actor reading the line, okay? How about this stylized version of the same phrase, okay? We started with this one. Then we changed the location of the notes to change the delivery. All right, here is this one. Same exact notes, same phrase, same rhythm, same pitches, all right? But pick, pull, slide, pick, pull, pick, slide. All of my legato techniques are moving into the beat as opposed to being after the beat. So let's hear all three of them, all right? So if I play the original one, 2, 3, 4. This one, and now this one. Something about this kind of playing to me is just much more appealing from a delivery perspective. In other words, the inflection, just like a great actor's voice, it's different, okay? So by changing the location on the fretboard, our stylistic elements fall into the beat. Where is the picking now? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'm picking on all the ands and using legatos either through pull-offs or slides to resolve rhythmically into the beat, okay? Once again, to my ears, this is better pronunciation, okay? Here's one more. This one's a little bit trickier. What if I use some reverse bends or pre-bends to execute all the same notes? Instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, what if I go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1? Oof, that's tricky. But man, does that have more, essence to it. There's something different about this delivery of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It's a lot harder to play, but man, does that sound so much more mature than that, even though it's all the same notes, okay? So in this example, the stylistic techniques fall on the beat. The majority of the pick notes are off the beat, okay? You should immediately apply this concept of melodic pronunciation to any phrase that's already in your vocabulary. Okay, you will find that when it comes to phrasing, many times it's not the note choices in your phrasing that you don't like or that you're not happy with. It's how you're pronouncing the words in the musical sentence, okay? One other thing about this is not, a rule to follow. It's just a guideline. You are free to play stylistic techniques, with any rhythm, anywhere within the measure, any location, but you need to be aware of the story being told based on those rhythmic choices that you make, okay? Three things really changed the more I started to develop this idea of my own playing. Three really dramatic things changed that I noticed pretty much immediately. Number one, I would play phrases that when I was aware of how much I was playing everything on the beat, I was like, oh, that's why it doesn't feel good, because I'm stressing the beat too much. I want to accent other rhythmic sounds that are on off beats, because that just becomes rhythmically more interesting. The second thing that happened is that as I started to transcribe more and more phrases from all my favorite players, I started to realize that they were all doing this. In other words, I started to realize that so many of the phrases that I love from my favorite musicians were actually based around this particular concept of using stylistic techniques with a rhythmic direction just as much as a collection of pitches within a melody. And the third thing that happened, which is the most important, is that I could immediately spot, if I was working with a student, I could immediately spot if they didn't have this in their vocabulary. My ear would tell me right away if everything somebody was playing was too connected to the beat and they weren't using other forms of pronunciation. So this allowed me to diagnose people's phrasing problems really quickly, because my ear could spot when they weren't doing this. And then I could immediately help my student work on fixing those issues in their playing, where it's not learning more scales and learning more notes, it's learning how to pronounce things better. So one quick and easy way to really feel the effect of rhythmic placement and rhythmic location when it comes to using stylistic techniques is rhythmic displacement, okay? Let's go back to the first version of that stylized phrase where I was going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, okay? Am I saying that's a bad phrase? No, that's a perfectly fine phrase. I just think that it could be better, okay? One of the main reasons, once again, why I found this phrase as far as pronunciation to be a little kind of dry is that, it's rhythmically lopsided. All the pick notes fall on the beat and the stylistic elements are off the beat. The other thing about this phrase that's rhythmically lopsided, it starts on 1 and it ends on 1. Okay, this is something I hear people do all the time. They start all their phrases on the downbeat and they end all their phrases on the downbeat, okay? The idea of rhythmic displacement is to be able to start a phrase anywhere in the bar and end a phrase anywhere in the bar. In other words, you should be able to play over the bar line. So you should be able to start in the middle of one measure and finish in the middle of the next measure. So instead of thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, where I started on 1 and ended on 1, what if I just move this phrase a little bit? I'm going to displace it by half of a beat or 1/8 note. And now this happens. If I skip beat 1 and I start on the and of 1 instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, now I get and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and here's what I really love about that. I'm starting on the and of 1 and I'm ending on the and of 1. Okay? Also, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. All of my picks are on the ands, right? So back to back. That's on 1. The and of 1. It breathes all kinds of new life into the same phrase just by starting and ending in a different part of the bar. What if I move it again? Okay, here's a couple more variations of displacement. What if I start on the and of 2 so that I finish on the and of 2? Okay, here's the plain vanilla one again, starting on 1. But what about 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2. That's just so much cooler to me, okay? What if I displace it again? What if I start on the and of 3? So instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. How about 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. My favorite one is actually the last one that I wrote on this chart here. You start on the and of 4, because then you end on the and of 4. So you end up getting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and I love that sound of ending on the and of 4. Okay, here we are again on beat 1. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. That to me, it feels better than always be like, okay, start on 1, end on 1. Well, no, start anywhere and end anywhere. You want to take the idea of displacement and really kind of move it around within, with any phrase that try it in different parts of the bar. Going back to my analogy of, an actor reading, for an audition, reading a script. Think of an actor like William Shatner, where his delivery is all strange and his timing is weird, okay? We're actually trying to do that intentionally with kind of a boring phrase like this, where, okay, start on 1, end on 1. Well, maybe not. If you put it in different parts of the bar, it's going to feel completely different, okay? I actually have a whole series of exercises based on rhythmic displacement that I give to my private students, what I call the relay race exercise. And it's a ton of different ways to take a single phrase and learn it with different rhythmic values in different parts of the bar. And all of a sudden, one old beat-up lick that you're tired of becomes a completely new thing just because of how you pronounce it, all right, through technique and articulation delivery, but also where it is in the bar, how it fits within the rhythmic environment. If you have any questions or comments on this concept, feel free to leave them below. Once again, I'll post the chart, a PDF of all these examples in the group, and I will see you next time. Thanks.